Welcome back, everyone. My name is Mike for the new folks here, and today we're going to be talking about what President Trump can actually do to improve the state of the Second Amendment once he takes office. Most of these are going to be things he can easily do unilaterally. A lot of these things we've actually done full videos on in the past. If you guys are interested in all the details, I'm going to try to keep it kind of high level today so that way it is digestible. But for a lot of new folks out here, if you guys aren't familiar with the history of firearms law and other things that have gone into import restrictions in America, your mind's probably about to be blown. So with that, let's get into it. So we have our whiteboard of truth here. Many of you are familiar with that. Some of you are already typing down below in the comments that you can't read it. That's okay. It's actually not really for you. It's for me to keep me on track and keep me running. And I have the penmanship of a doctor. So some of these ones here that have these little stars, they're a little different. We'll talk about why here. So these are not in any particular order. These are just things that I came up with off the top of my head that could easily be done. So the first one is going to be repeal Bush 41's 1989 ban. So essentially what that executive order did is President Bush Sr. repealed all imports of non-sporting semi-automatic guns. So what that ended up doing was making it so that a ton of guns couldn't be imported. For example, the most obvious at the time were Chinese AK-47 variants, the semi-automatic clones and Rinkos and stuff that were coming in. Those were stopped, and for many, many years, for almost 20 years, other guns that were being imported had to be imported in a way that they are not functional in their normal state. So for example, let me just give you a really easy example. So a Romanian Wasser 10, when it comes into America, it doesn't look like it does when you guys see it on the shelves. A bunch of things have to happen. In some cases, bolts have to be changed. In some cases, the magazine has to be cut out in a different way to accept standard capacity magazines because the ones that came in with it were real small capacity and had a different feeding mechanism. So that way they were sporting according to this ban, and that's how they were able to come in. So this has been going on for a long time. Again, it was an executive order. It could easily be done overnight, one stroke of a pen, just absolutely reject it. And then what that would do is a lot of the guns that were coming in at the time, like another good example was Norinco used to make, they still do, you can actually get them in Canada still, Norinco forged receiver M14s that were cheaper than anything that's available now with a non-forged receiver. So a lot of guns like that. A lot of other handguns were affected. So like the old James Bond Walther type guns, those weren't allowed to be imported due to their size being too small. They were too small for sporting purposes, according to the ban. So again, a lot of this stuff could go away immediately overnight, and that would just give the American buyer, the American consumer, more options and very likely lower prices as well, because when there's more options, there's more competition. Kind of just makes sense. The next one would just be to officially address the pistol brace. So the pistol brace has been around for well over 10 years now and has gone through some sort of iterations in terms of interpretation of the legalities of it. So as of right now, we initially were relying on the ATF's technical branch to make a ruling or determination on it. They did that for years. Then it went through the court system. It was banned. And then, of course, went through the court system. Now it is legal. However, the president could very easily, with an executive action, cement that in place and make it so that they are good to go, you know, indefinitely. Moving down the list, the next one is going to be the presumptive approval of NFA items. This one's a little bit complex. It's something, if you guys follow Chuck Rossi on Twitter, a friend of mine, he talks about it all the time, but it is totally doable. So the way the National Firearms Act items works, and still before that, for the new folks, National Firearms Act makes it so that you have to apply for a stamp, a government-approved tax stamp, to own an item. Tax stamps range anywhere from $5 to $200. Most of them are $200, so just know that going forward. And they cover things like suppressors, short-barrel shotguns, short-barrel rifles, destructive devices, any other weapon, different explosives, things like that. The explosives one's a little bit different, but it is covered under the NFA. But leave explosives aside for what I'm about to talk about. So the way you get one in America right now is that you fill out either a Form 1 or a Form 4 for the item that gets sent up by your dealer to the ATF. The ATF then refers it over to the FBI. The FBI conducts a background check on you. The FBI then tells the ATF it's good. The ATF then tells your dealer it's good. And then you can take your item home, even though you've paid for it sometimes 2 years prior when you initially filled out the form. So the processing times have ranged anywhere from a couple weeks to 2 years, like I just said. And these items are lawful items that Americans can own. And so obviously the 1934 Gun Control Act cannot be changed unilaterally by the president. However, the way the forms are processed and handled by the executive agencies, i.e. the FBI and the ATF, absolutely can be changed by executive order. So basically what the recommendation here is, real high level, is just to make it very similar to how you do background checks for firearms. So in most states, you fill out a 4473, which is just a form. They either check to see if you have a concealed carry permit, or they call in your background check and you have your answer within, an hour or less. Sometimes if you have a concealed carry permit, a lot of times there's no background check because the concealed carry permit is your background check. So that absolutely could be changed to the way that NFA items are rather applied to the way NFA items are processed. Essentially, they're just assuming that you're going to pass, just like with the NICS check, it's the same thing. And then if they find something out later, just like with a NICS check for firearms, then they would come back and resolve the issue. So that absolutely could happen as well. The next one is going to be to expand CNR firearms to what the law actually says it is. So CNR firearms are curio and relic, meaning that they are historically relevant guns, essentially. And when that law was passed, it was to include firearms that were 50 years or older, or whatever the ATF deems is a CNR firearm. Now, that really hasn't been updated. And if you think about the time that we're living in now, it's 2024, 50 years ago, do the math, right? The 70s, there was a lot of cool guns out there that we can't get under CNR status. So CNR status does a few things. Number one, it just, obviously the most obvious is that it makes them much easier to get in terms of transferring them to you. There's different categories, and there's actually different categories of gun dealers. Some of them can only sell CNR firearms. So what that would do would expand the amount of just places you could get firearms be sold, be transferred, etc. And it would also apply to a lot of other guns that right now the ATF doesn't say it applies to. So like, for example, the Steyr-AUG. A lot of those are out there that would apply to CNR firearms, or rather would be considered CNR firearms if they actually interpreted the statute the way the law says. They haven't done that, and that, again, could be easily changed. Next one is going to be Russian firearms, and ammo, as well as Form 6s. So that's kind of a rabbit hole there. But for those that don't know, the importation of Russian firearms was stopped by President Obama through executive order. And then the ammunition from Russia was also stopped at the same time. But what they actually did in that executive order, which actually makes it easier to overturn, is what President Obama directed the ATF to do, was for them to stop issuing and processing Form 6s. And a Form 6 is a form that a dealer fills out to import ammo to the United States. They gave the processing folks a certain time when they were supposed to stop processing them from Russia, and that has happened now. Initially, it took, I think, like 18 months to actually go into effect, but that has happened. And so if you guys are like AK fans, for example, and your Sega-based AKs, like your SGL 31s, your SGL 21s, etc., those have been banned. We haven't been able to get them. And additionally now, since those guns came out, guns like the AK-12 and other really cool Russian guns have been prohibited from being imported into the United States. And just like we were talking about here, if we repeal the Bush ban, then they can actually be imported in their normal configuration and don't have to go through an expensive conversion process to get them to the US market. Before we continue on, we do need to thank the main channel sponsor, and that, of course, is Brownells. Brownells probably agrees with everything I'm saying here, and they want to sell these items to you. However, right now they're offering all types of stuff over there that people who are watching this channel are probably interested in. Firearms, magazines, accessories, optics, ammunition, as well as a ton of gunsmithing supplies are over there at Brownells. So big thank you to them for sponsoring this channel. Now getting back into the list, again, we have AP ammo, or armor penetrating or armor piercing, depending on which portion of the law you actually read it in, because it is written both ways in US law. So it is open to interpretation, the way the law reads. So for example, President Obama tried to ban two different types through executive action. He tried to ban M855, which is or at least was up until a couple years ago, the standard issued round of the United States military. It has a small steel penetrator, if you will, in the tip. That's not actually AP. If you look armor penetrating if you actually look into the definition. So he tried to ban the sale of that in the United States, even though it is domestically produced. He tried to say that it was covered under the armor penetrating prohibition on ammo. The American public went crazy and signed like millions and millions of petitions. I actually had a full video campaign for this when this happened, and President Obama never went forth with that change to the way that the ammo would have been redefined. However, he did the exact same thing for a type of ammo that many of you probably won't remember if you're new here, but it was called 7N6, and essentially what that was, at the time, was the cheapest ammo in America for a centerfire rifle, and it was fired from an AK-74. You could get them for 12 or 13 cents a round shipped, delivered to your door at that time because it was so plentiful. However, just like M855, it had a steel piece in the tip of the bullet, as well as a little hollow pocket that made it tumble and react a certain way. It was no more armor penetrating than 855 was, just to be clear. However, not a lot of people had AK-74s and a ton of people had AR-15s. So not enough people got upset and signed the online petition, so Obama went ahead and banned it. So that could be easily, immediately removed. Another one that was banned in a very similar fashion, once again, by President Bush Sr., the first President Bush, was a lot of Norinco 7.62 by 39 ammo. That stuff, again, it used to be dirt cheap. It used to be like 7 cents a round when it would come in. However, it was determined to be armor penetrating because of the same thing. It had a steel portion in the front of the bullet, and they just outright banned it. Now, there's other types of ammo that would also fall into this category. There's ammo made in Venezuela that we could import if this went away overnight, because it can go away overnight. It is literally the executive branch's decision as to what they interpret as armor penetrating. And again, could just be overridden with a single stroke of a pen. The next one up here might be a little bit controversial depending on your knowledge of how these things have worked in the past, but trust me when I tell you, there's been a few of these, and there certainly could be another one with, again, an executive order, and that would be a machine gun amnesty period. So just as an example, during World War II, a lot of veterans brought home captured machine guns that were captured either in the Pacific or in the European theater, and they had them at home. And then in 1986, of course, you couldn't create or manufacture new machine guns. So there was a period known as an amnesty period where if you had brought those machine guns in and you hadn't registered them under the National Firearms Act of 1934 that we talked about previously, then you could put them on the registry and you would not be charged with a felony. Again, this has happened a couple of times actually, historically speaking, but the same thing or similar things have happened over the last, 30 years with the Global War on Terrorism. There are a ton of machine guns that have been brought back by soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines. Of course, during the modern era, most of them knew that it was, not the right thing to do at the time, legally speaking. However, I can tell you there's a ton of them out there. If you guys look around at the prices of machine guns right now, because there's only a limited supply that are actually on the registry, they're very, very expensive. So getting more of them on the registry, number one, is going to decrease the price of getting a legal machine gun, but it's also going to get people who are kind of sitting in a legally precarious position, not to be in the same position. The next one up would also be one of the really easy ones to fix because it was put into place by Obama. So if you put in 41F or 41P into the search box on my channel, you will see like 10 different videos where I break this down in detail as it was happening at the time. But long story short is Obama's rule, it was called 41F. What it did was it made it so that anybody who's on a trust that owns National Firearms Act items against suppressors, short barrel rifles, shotguns, etc., that anytime you wanted to acquire a new item, every single person on the trust, and some of these trusts have, 20 people on it if you have a large family, every single person had to submit fingerprints, photo ID, go through a background check, and pay the fee in order to get that item put on the trust. Before that, only one person had to, and then it could be put on the trust. It was just much easier, and then everybody on the trust could use that item. So if you had let's say a father and son, and the suppressor was, bought by the father, put in the trust, then the son could take it out as long as he was on the trust and go to the range with the suppressor and not have to risk 10 years in jail and a felony charge because his father wasn't there with him, if that makes sense. So that one's really easy to do. Again, it could be changed with a stroke of a pen, and with how popular suppressors have become over the years, it absolutely would make a huge impact. So I think the last number I saw was there's 3.5 million suppressors in America right now. And if you kind of chart that out over time, like 10 years ago, there was less than a million. So it has gone up exponentially because people are realizing that they want to have these devices that are safety devices and don't want to have to risk damaging their hearing just because they want to enjoy a hobby. So that one would really be good for the suppressor industry. It would take off overnight, and there's simply no reason not to. I mean, these are tubes that are pieces of metal. There really should not be anything on that. Next one up is going to be to redefine or to eliminate 922R. Now there's a star next to this one because 922R is a section of US law that was passed by Congress. However, the way it's interpreted has changed over the years somewhat. Long story short of what 922R is it is a point system that is assigned to every firearm that a company wants to send to America, a foreign company. So just for example, if Germany wants to send in a new HK rifle, that rifle has to have a certain number of parts when it is sold here in America that were made in America to be 922R compliant. For example, like a magazine is part of it, a muzzle device is part of it. It's a whole list, but what ends up happening is there's a ton of guns that simply can't qualify under the way that 922R is currently being interpreted. So it's keeping guns out of the hands of American citizens who want to enjoy them. Additionally, what it's also doing is it's causing companies in America who are importing these firearms to have to add a tremendous amount of cost to convert them to be 922R compliant, meaning that the guns that you purchase that are 922R compliant are much more expensive than they otherwise would be. Again, some of this is law, some of it is interpretation, but certainly the president could lobby Congress to completely eliminate it. And before that happened, while they're waiting on that legislation to happen, they could change the way that some of the interpretive parts of it are for sure. Next one is going to be one that once again is going to be a little bit of law here that we might have to work with Congress on. I've actually seen folks, attorneys who have said that this could be done via executive order. I'm not entirely sure on that. Don't quote me on that, but it is worth talking about to eliminate the 10 or 11% tax that is on all American-made guns that are sold within America. So for those who don't know, if a gun is made in America and sold in America as a complete firearm, i.e. not a collection of parts, as a complete firearm, depending on the category of gun that it is, there is either a 10% or 11% tax that's on the gun that you don't see. So if you go to buy a rifle, for example, that's made in America and it's $1,000, well then the actual cost that you're paying, like it's going to the company that manufactured it, is going to be $900-ish, depending on the category of firearm that it is, and the other $100 or $110 is going to the federal government. So that could be changed. It's actually part of a Conservation Act bill. It's not part of like an anti-firearms bill. However, if the president can't do it, if his attorneys say they can't, he could certainly support it being eliminated. And if you just think about that, I mean, every single gun made in America, sold in America, is going to cost 10% less overnight when that happens. So that certainly is something that we should look into, in my opinion, because it is insane. There's not a lot of products that have that type of tax on it in America. Of course, guns just happen to be one of them. And with that, guys, we're going to end the video there. If you like this type of video and you're not subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you are subscribed and you hit the notification bell and you're not seeing 2 to 4 videos a week here on the channel, then there is an algorithm censoring your eyes from my content. You can head over to MrGunsGear.com, sign up for the email there. That will get you on the list of emails that goes out once a month, and it has all the videos since the previous month's email went out. Additionally, you can sign up for the Daily Deals email over there, and that will go out every day, as the name indicates. It has 8 of the best deals that we find around the internet on items like guns, ammunition, optics, flashlights, etc. If the item is in the email on a given day, it's the cheapest I know of anywhere on the internet for that item. So that way it doesn't, so that way it saves you some time and saves you some money because I've already done the comparisons for you. Additionally, if you guys want to receive my deals through your SMS text box rather than an email, by all means, we have that service as well. You can head over to MrGunsGear.com/SMS. One time will go out once a day, and it will have all the good deals of the day for you guys to check out. And lastly, if you don't want to do any of that, that's cool. If you could just share the video, that will help get this information in front of more people, which will make it much more likely that it will happen. Because if there is a mandate, which a lot of people believe that there is for President Trump, that mandate should include these changes to firearms laws and firearms regulations. In my opinion, if you have any ideas of ones that I missed, let me know down below in the comments as well. But with that, we're going to close it out. Thank you for watching. Look forward to seeing everybody in the next video.